Well, Shabbat Shalom again. I invite you to close that prayer book unless you'd like to read on while I'm chatting, and that's fine with me too. I'd like to begin my sermon with a Jeopardy trivia question. Here it is. What is it that God promises our biblical ancestors when God forges the covenant with our people in the book of Genesis? What is it that God promises our ancestors way back in the book of Genesis when God forges that covenant? It's a real question. You guys can raise your hand and respond. Yeah, Dave. A promised land. Good. Yes? We'll be a nation. Okay. What else? Great. I think that was back there. With the masks, it's tough. Oh, great. Good. Our people will be as numerous as the stars in heaven. Good. Anything else? God will be with us. Good. Great. You all pass. Right? There are two answers to that question, two correct answers that I was looking for. One, land. Read the land of Israel. And two, descendants. That we will be as numerous as the stars in heaven. From the very beginning of our people's story, we were promised a safe homeland of our own, and not just that we can survive, but in acting in God's ways, we can thrive. These promises motivated our ancestors in the wilderness and became almost inalienable rights, certainly cherished and deserved by all. Feeling distanced from that ancestral homeland of Eretz Yisrael has been a source of great pain for our people throughout our history. Just consider this week's Torah portion, the final chapters of the book of Genesis. Parashat Vayechi opens with a touching scene between Jacob and his beloved son Joseph. Our forefather Jacob was 147 years old and nearing death. Having spent the last 17 years in Egypt so that he could be close to his beloved son, Jacob begs Joseph, "Please do not bury me here in the land of Egypt." As we read last week, it troubled Jacob that he had to go to Egypt in the first place, and surely he did not want to be buried there forever. He longed to be home in Canaan, the land of Israel. You see, Jacob was a refugee, living 17 years in a strange land, forced to go there because of a great famine that plagued the region. He didn't want to be there. But Jacob had nowhere else to go other than Egypt, where his son had established himself in the court of Pharaoh. See, Joseph was equipped to resettle his father and his brothers in that land. This week's Torah portion is just one example in the Bible and then later Jewish history when our people have identified as refugees. The narrative of our people being strangers and finding home is our most powerful foundational story. The Jewish people are called Ivrim after our biblical forefather, Jacob's grandfather, Abraham, the Hebrew. The three-letter root of the word Ivrim, or Hebrews, are the letters Ayin, Vet, Resh, Avar, meaning one who passes over or through. Indeed, we have navigated deserts and crossed seas in search of home. Consider also the story we tell while seated around the Passover dinner table. The Haggadah reminds us that we know the bitterness of slavery and remember the 40 years that we wandered as refugees in the wilderness. Now, as a free people, it is our obligation to look beyond ourselves and acknowledge with love all who remain oppressed, all those who are still unable to live life as they deserve to wish to live. As they deserve and wish to live. This tradition has inspired our congregation to participate in the work of refugee resettlement, not just of Jews, but of all who are still navigating their own wildernesses, fleeing famine, war, depression of any kind. NSCI's commitment to refugee resettlement predates 2018, when you probably remember we created what we now call 17, NSCI's Refugee Resettlement Project, the name we've given to our most recent efforts. Remember, 17 is the number of years that Jacob spends in Egypt. It's also the number of years that modern refugees spend living in limbo, in temporary refugee camps all around our world. NSCI's efforts date back to the earliest period in NSCI's history, when congregants welcomed our first assistant rabbi, Rabbi Arthur Bloom and his family, who were rescued from the Nazis in 1938. Later in the 1970s, NSCI's Board of Trustees revisited conversations on international resettlement. Detailed minutes exist, and I thank Merle Branner for her research. These minutes exist in which our synagogue leadership strategized how best to welcome Vietnamese families who were fleeing oppressive legislation enforced by the communist regime. On January 16, 1980, NSCI welcomed the Tran family, refugees from Vietnam. Some of you took part in that work. Our community fundraised, rented an apartment for them in nearby Highland Park, cooked meals, tutored them in English. One family even loaned them a station wagon, and others helped the adults secure employment. NSCI remains committed to the work of refugee resettlement, honoring the legacy of our founders and continuing to embody Judaism's highest callings. Since 2018, NSCI has co-sponsored the resettlement of 4 refugee families, 2 Rohingya families, a Congolese family, and most recently a Jewish family who left Ukraine. Today, I am really excited to announce that we are again preparing to welcome another family in early January or late February of 2022. It is almost certain that this family will be from Afghanistan, airlifted from Kabul this past summer, and currently living among the roughly 31,000 Afghans still living on 7 military bases here in the U.S. We all watched live on television as recent insecurity prompted a humanitarian crisis for the Afghan people, who already suffered more than 40 years of conflict, as well as increased natural disasters, chronic poverty, and food insecurity. Just as our tradition demands, we will open our hearts again to the plight of international refugees and build a home for one family this new year. The thing is, just like our forefather Jacob, who never wanted to go to Egypt, almost all refugees today just want to return home. Unfortunately, that wasn't possible for any of the refugee families that NSCI has resettled here in the Chicagoland area, and is not an option for this next family we will soon welcome. So, we will build them as comfortable and safe a home here and help them, connect them with resources for them to thrive here in this country. So how can you help? 1, we'll ask you in these coming weeks to donate money. Let's together help this family furnish a new home and get on their feet here in our area. In these next few weeks, we'll need to fundraise roughly $13,000 to help cover initial expenses like rent, bills, and other immediate needs as the family works towards self-reliance. 2, you can provide resources, groceries, furniture, and home goods to help build a home for this arriving family. We'll soon share details of exactly what we need and how you can offer these in-kind items. 3, we'll ask you to volunteer. Volunteer opportunities include greeting the family at O'Hare, providing them with warm meals, their first evenings here in America, and other opportunities to help the family begin anew in Chicago. More details to come very, very soon. If you have any questions about this initiative, I'd invite you to email me, Rabbi Daniels at NSCI.org, or reach out to any of my lay partners in this work, to Andy Apsler, Michelle Gorski, Jenny Quinn, and Ann Weisberg. Ever since the beginning of our people's story way back in Genesis, the narrative of our people being strangers and finding home is our most powerful foundational story. We've known what it's like to struggle in the face of major challenges from without and within, and the pain of being unable to return home. Jewish tradition beckons each of us now more than ever to remember our people's journey and to utilize our power to help others whose current struggles are all too familiar. Doing this furthers our synagogue's commitment to resettling refugees and models our sacred obligation as Jews to care for the stranger. So I invite you again to join us in this work as we prepare to welcome an Afghan family in just a couple weeks. May our efforts enrich the lives of all who participate and bring strength and, in the fullness of time, peace, healing to the family with whom we're matched. Can you hear at Zone? May our actions merit that coming true. Shabbat Shalom.